Before the modern era, hunting was all about putting food on the table for one's family. But now it's more of a hobby for most people in the Western world. It can be risky, but if the hunter is well skilled, he comes back with a prize. But sometimes things take a weird turn during a hunting trip. Hunters vanish into thin air while in the woods, leaving behind no trails as to what happened to them. In this video, we'll look at 5 of those cases and see what happened before they disappeared without a trace. Chances are, if you're 82 years old, your doctors are probably going to advise you not to go hunting. Your body is not what it used to be, and trekking through the woods for miles would only do you more damage. But 82-year-old Thomas Messick Sr. wasn't one to take such advice. Despite his old age, this ex-paratrooper wasn't ready to give up hunting. He'd been hunting with his old friends, all seasoned veterans like him, for over 55 years. So when they invited him on their annual trip, he was all in, even though he had just recovered from a bout of shingles. On November 15, 2015, he and his group of friends set out on another hunting adventure in the woods south of Brant Lake in New York. This spot was legendary for hunters and fishermen, even attracting big names like former President Teddy Roosevelt back in the day. With Messick and his group of friends' wealth of experience, it's safe to assume that they were confident about having a successful hunt, spiced with some fun. Arriving at their chosen location, they devised a 2-part plan to catch the prey. It was quite a simple plan. Messick would hold position, while the others flushed out deer towards him, making them easier targets. He would then pick them off as much as he could. As time passed, Messick's friends arrived at where he was supposed to be and noticed something strange. He was gone. There was no sign of him, his rifle, or even his walkie-talkie. Did he bag some trophies and head back early? Nope, not a single deer was in sight either. Worried, his friends started searching for him. After a while, they had to call in the forest rangers for help, as Messick was yet to return, even after the agreed-upon time. The search continued, but soon it was dark, and they could no longer go deeper into the woods. Even at this point, Messick's friends knew they couldn't all just return home. Half the group stayed, fired their rifles, and honked the car horns to attract him to the area where they were camped. The remaining men left to inform his family and the authorities about the situation. Despite everyone hoping that Messick would return, there was no sign of him all night. By morning, a team of 13 trained search and rescue personnel from the Park Service were on the case. Unfortunately, their search came up empty too. Over the next few weeks, the search exploded. Over 300 people, from volunteers to law enforcement, joined in. They used everything they had, dogs, helicopters, the whole works, but Messick vanished without a trace. At some point, the FBI joined in on the case. Their arrival offered a glimmer of hope, but it wasn't meant to be. No leads surfaced and the mystery only deepened. Soon it was clear that the investigation had hit a dead end, and slowly everyone began to accept that Messick was gone for good. The only comfort in this tragedy was the lack of evidence suggesting foul play, but that didn't stop theories from swirling. One in particular focused on Messick's health issues. He had a history of heart trouble, not to mention poor vision and hearing. Combine that with his age, and some folks believed he might have stumbled into a hidden cave or crevice and gotten hurt, unable to call for help. To honor Messick's memory and offer some closure to his family, a memorial gravesite was established, which can still be visited today. On October 5, 2013, 74-year-old Barnett Zeldin and his wife went out to have a fancy dinner of coconut shrimp and tilapia at the Chart House in Atlantic City's Golden Nugget Casino. It was their wedding anniversary, and since they had been married for 50 years, it was only right that they toast to the years ahead together. Unfortunately, the couple never got to share another anniversary together. Just 2 days after their lovely celebration, Zeldin vanished without a trace. On the morning of that day, Zeldin informed his wife that he was heading for Wharton Forest Park in Washington Township, Burlington County, New Jersey. His plan was to set up his tree stand for the upcoming deer hunting season. He even stopped by the Audubon Gun Club in Woodland to sign in before going into the woods for his mission. Typically, he should have been back at the club that same night, but nobody saw him return. Now, Zeldin's wife tried calling him that night, but it went straight to voicemail. At first, she wasn't too worried. Zeldin wasn't exactly known for checking in on the first day. Plus, he was a seasoned hunter of different kinds of prey. In his home, there were several hunting trophies that showed how good he is, including a stuffed 900-pound grizzly bear he killed in Alaska. All things considered, she probably felt Zeldin just got too comfy in his tree stand and forgot his phone. After all, with all those hunting trophies under his belt, Zeldin knew what he was doing out there. He'd be back safe and sound, no doubt. But by the second day, when her call still went to voicemail, a knot started to form in her stomach. This wasn't like Zeldin. He wouldn't just disappear for days on a hunting trip, not without letting her know. By the third day, that knot had turned into full-blown worry. Knowing something was terribly wrong, Zeldin's wife drove down to the Audubon Gun Club on the fourth day. There, her worst fear was confirmed. Zeldin hadn't come back. Without wasting another minute, they threw together a search party and alerted the authorities. Soon, the New Jersey State Police and Park Police joined forces, throwing everything they had at the search. Canine units and helicopters scoured the vast wilderness of Wharton Forest, a massive 617-acre area. It wasn't long before they found Zeldin's truck, a dusty 1992 Chevy Blazer, parked near his usual hunting spot. However, the details were unsettling. The car keys were still in the ignition, something you only do if you're planning on being right back. Inside, they found his phone, wallet, and even his trusty dog, who went everywhere with him. There was even bait, corn and molasses, untouched in the truck. The windows were also down, which both explained how the dog might have survived, but it also painted a chilling picture. With the truck as the lead, the search team held on to hope. Maybe Zeldin was just disoriented somewhere nearby, maybe even injured. But then came another blow. They found out Zeldin had type 2 diabetes and a history of strokes. Without his medication, surviving out there for days looked grim. The search continued, now not just for a living Zeldin, but for any sign of him at all. Despite the exhaustive efforts of law enforcement agents, they hit a dead end in their search for Zeldin, prompting them to call off the search. However, undeterred by this setback, Zeldin's family, friends, and neighbors took matters into their own hands, conducting daily searches. They plastered signs in the area featuring Zeldin's photo and rallied volunteers to go door to door, questioning residents about any sightings or information that could shed light on his disappearance. As a last desperate move, Zeldin's family even brought in psychic Barbara Mackey from Toms River to help out. The psychic had a hunch about where Barnett might be. She pinpointed an area 5 miles northwest of his vehicle, which triggered a new set of searches for Zeldin's family. However, like the previous instances, this also yielded nothing. His disappearance is still a total mystery, and folks in the wilderness and hunting circles still talk about it. On a Friday morning back in November 2013, Eric Smith from Cedar Bluff, Virginia, headed out around 10 a.m. from his home. He had in mind to visit his rural land for some hunting, taking some time off from his stressful job as the general foreman of the Buchanan No. 1 mine. Before leaving, he told his wife of his plan, just as she was preparing to go to his mother's place in Buchanan County for the day with one of their daughters. All things considered, they were going to meet back at home later that day. However, when Smith's wife returned, the house was empty, the same way she left it. Smith's wife felt that he'd be back soon, maybe a little tired from not feeling well all week. But as the sun began to set and he still wasn't home, worry started to creep in. It wasn't like he was planning a whole camping trip. He didn't even take his phone, meaning there was no way to call and check in. The more time passed, the worse the feeling got in her gut. Finally, she couldn't wait any longer. She decided to head back to her mother-in-law's place, who by chance was at a church service nearby that night. Upon hearing about Smith's disappearance, Smith's mother joined his wife and other family members to race straight to Smith's land to begin a search for him. Even though it wasn't too cold earlier, maybe in the 50s, things were starting to get chilly fast as night fell. At this moment, Smith's wife knew she had to take further action. She called the police and reported her husband missing. The police also didn't waste any time. Officers, firefighters, and everyone who could lend a hand were out searching the area around Smith's property that night. But it was like looking for a needle in a haystack since the woods were so thick. To help matters, the state police helicopter with night vision was brought in. However, it turned up nothing significant when it canvassed the area. The next day, the search kicked back into high gear. The law enforcement officers brought in sniffer dogs, hoping to catch a scent of Eric. The dogs picked up a few trails leading away from his house, but frustratingly, none of them went anywhere. One trail even seemed to loop back around, but was ruled out as being a few days old. Since Eric had his muzzleloader with him, and it could be loaded, they decided to play it safe and brought in dogs trained to sniff out explosives. Unfortunately, that didn't pan out either. By Sunday, it had become a full-blown search for Smith. Around 60 people were combing the woods. Trained search and rescue crews, Smith's buddies from work, and even neighbors all pitched in. But with every passing hour, hope started to dwindle, and to make things even tougher, Smith was wearing some top-notch camo that practically hid him in the trees. It felt like they were searching for a ghost. The search went on for a while, but eventually they had to call it off when no real clues were uncovered. Smith's family even offered a big reward of $20,000 for any information that could help find Smith. Sadly, nothing was found or reported. Smith's disappearance hit his family the hardest, of course, but his co-workers were wrecked too. According to reports, no one had any bad words to say, as he got along well with everyone. Back on October 21, 2007, some hunters were camping in the Chimney Rock area of western Grand County, Colorado. They stumbled on a weird sight, a rifle leaning all alone against a pickup truck parked along a forest road. They remembered seeing a man around the truck the day before, but now it was just the rifle. This definitely creeped them out enough to call the Department of Wildlife. Later on, officers from the Department of Wildlife, or DOW, pulled up to the scene. They eyed the truck cautiously. It was locked tight, and everything seemed normal, except for the rifle laying abandoned on the ground beside it. Figuring it was better safe than sorry, they whipped out their cameras to snap some pictures of the weapon for evidence. Then, they carefully collected the rifle and stashed it securely in their patrol car for safekeeping. Now, they had a bit of a mystery to unravel. Who left the rifle behind and why? Back at their office, the DOW officers ran a check on the truck's license plate, and a name popped up, Dale Banker, a resident of Denver. It turned out Banker had hunting licenses for the area where his truck was parked, and even another hunting area further south. So Banker was a legit hunter in the right place at the right time. But where was he? The days ticked by, and the DOW officers kept an eye on Banker's truck. However, it was all in vain. There was no sign of movement, no fresh tracks in the snow around it. It was like nobody had been near it. Finally, after 5 days of Banker not returning, they decided it was time to call in some backup. They contacted the sheriff's department to let them know about the abandoned truck. Unlike the DOW officers who only searched around the car, the sheriff's deputies took things a step further. They unlocked it and found a whole other scene. Another gun, clothes for all kinds of weather, a sleeping bag, and a bunch of other personal things. It looked like Banker was all set up for an extended stay. The mystery deepened 2 days after the initial arrival of the deputies. A search party was launched to find Banker. This included a dozen members of search and rescue, along with their trusty bloodhound companions. They scoured the area around the truck all day, but Banker seemed to have vanished without a trace. This wasn't just a case of a forgotten rifle anymore. Seeing no signs of Banker after the search, the sheriff's department decided to take Banker's truck into custody. Meanwhile, they were determined to track Banker down. They figured his home might hold some clues, so they contacted the Denver Police Department and asked them to check it out. The Denver officers scoured Banker's place, and what did they find? Maps, all marked up with something. Unfortunately, these marked maps seemed more like a dead end than a helpful lead. Further investigation revealed no clues, as Banker did not have family or many friends in Denver. For years, Banker's disappearance remained a cold case up until September 2018. Some human remains were found by hunters in the White Slide area near Carter Mountain, which is relatively close to the Chimney Rock area of western Grand County. Sadly, after a thorough investigation, it turned out to be a different story. The remains weren't connected to Banker, and the puzzle of his disappearance remained unsolved. On October 15, 2004, Jeremy Ivan Childress went on an annual elk hunting trip with a co-worker, Shane Louie, and Louie's young son, Shane Jr. Their destination? The Tillamook Forest in Oregon, a place well known as a great spot for hunters. Things took a turn for the worse not long after they set off. Somewhere along the way, they took a wrong turn and lost sight of where they held camp. The trio backtracked, hoping to stumble upon some familiar sight, but the dense forest seemed to swallow up any sign of their campsite. As they went deeper into the woods, Louie's young son grew increasingly scared. This prompted Louie to give up on the search and head back to the truck with his son. However, Childress, who was a far better hunter with years of experience navigating the wilderness, wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet. Leaving his co-worker and his son behind, he ventured off alone with a promise to come back for them once he found the camp. Little did they know, this goodbye would be their last. Childress never returned as promised. On October 18th, a logger found the Louies and had to lead them out of the woods, since Childress was the only one who knew his way around. Childress's disappearance was quickly reported to the right authorities. Seeing the seriousness of the case, they swung into action, organizing a search for him. Over 300 people eventually joined the search. Despite the area where Childress vanished being filled with many dangers, such as wild animals and gullies, they were determined to find him. For a whole week, the authorities and volunteers searched the area with dog teams, helicopters, and all-terrain vehicles. But all they found was a single gum wrapper, the kind Childress liked to chew. They did find an empty campsite a mile and a half from where he went missing, but that was it. Childress's rifle and his pack of cigarettes, which he took along prior to venturing into the woods, were never recovered, nor did they find him dead or alive. Even though things looked grim, Childress's loved ones still did not give up. On some occasions, hunters went missing, and most of the time they turned up okay. They hoped this was also going to be the case for Childress, but as the days turned into weeks, it became clear he wasn't coming back. It took a long time, all the way until 2006, before a death certificate was obtained for Childress. While it acknowledged that he was deceased, his loved ones are still yet to find closure.